Imagine a teenager tucked into the front seat of a beat-up Chevy Blazer, typing a business plan at 65 miles per hour while the world outside the windshield melts into interstate hum. Now imagine that plan, begun on a highway and scribbled between exits, eventually orchestrating an economy where more than $1 million change hands every single minute, a figure often used to gesture at the staggering scale Amazon reached. That contrast, a road trip bookkeeping to an industrial behemoth, is the axis of the untold story, not just what Jeff Bezos built, but how he engineered systems, incentives, and infrastructure so precise and relentless that whole industries were forced to reinvent themselves or vanish. If you like deep dives into how technology reshapes power, stay with me for the next 20 minutes. Subscribe for more histories like this, because the story of Amazon is less a single triumph than a set of deliberate moves that remade markets. Bezos's life reads like a blueprint for engineered ambition. Adopted as a child, fascinated by rockets and the possibility of leaving Earth, he carried a long view from the start, an obsession with scale measured in decades, not quarters. At Princeton, he absorbed computer science and electrical engineering. On Wall Street, he learned the rhythms of algorithms and trading desks. David Shaw, a quant investor who hired the young Bezos to de-shore, became both mentor and validation. Intellectual rigor and a tolerance for risk, married to a mania for measurable advantage. It's easy to compress that biography into a handful of heroic scenes, but the important thing is the posture it produced. Bezos, as an engineer of systems, mind-tuned to feedback loops, incentives, and the leverage of infrastructure. There's a mythic moment everyone cites, a business plan typed in the front seat of that Blazer on a cross-country drive. The details matter less than the lesson it encoded. From day one, Bezos set a table of two demands: obsess about the customer, be obsessively frugal. The early office was famous for the door laid on sawhorse's desk, a symbol more than a piece of furniture, a ritual of scarcity that signaled priorities. A bell rang in the young company every time a sale occurred, and that bell became a sonic shorthand for immediate feedback and hunger. Small practices seeded a culture. 6-page memos took the place of PowerPoint. Decisions were expected to be data rigorously justified, and an internal mantra, paraphrased widely by employees, distilled strategy. Your margin is my opportunity. That line would reappear in more formal guises as the company expanded. Where competitors saw profit, Amazon saw the chance to undercut, scale, and replace. Then Bezos made a strategic choice that turned a store into a platform. Amazon didn't merely open a virtual bookshelf, it created spaces where other sellers could live and sell. Early features that might now seem like product polish, customer reviews, star ratings, frictionless checkout, were tools to lower buyer uncertainty and to grow trust in commerce happening online. Marketplace, the business that invited third-party sellers onto the site, was an accelerant. It let Amazon dramatically expand selection without commensurate inventory risk. And because marketplace data lived inside Amazon systems, the company could see what sold, when it sold, and who made the profit. Marketplace transformed Amazon into a vast market scanner, where the platform both facilitated commerce and learned from it. Growth, for Amazon, was a doctrine. Bezos made choices that favored scale above early profit. Money was plowed back into logistics, into servers, into engineering. Where rivals protected margins, Amazon chased market share, often sacrificing short-term earnings to build an architecture that competitors could not match. That get-big-fast instinct had an operational expression. Fulfillment centers exploding across suburban landscapes, fleets of brown trucks and contract drivers, warehouses stitched together with software that monitored every pick, box, and move. Robotics entered the picture as automation to remove labor bottlenecks, and inventory algorithms decided not only how much stock to hold, but where it should sit across a continent to speed delivery and lower costs. The system was designed to compress time and distance between product and buyer, and in doing so, to make alternative retail models feel slow and expensive. Two products, Prime and Kindle, rewired consumer behavior in ways that multiplied Amazon's leverage. Prime began as a shipping subscription offering faster delivery and free returns, but it evolved into a behavioral engine. Customers who paid an annual fee stopped shopping for deals. They began to default to Amazon. Prime altered loyalty from being price-based and sporadic to being habit-based and habitual. Critics later described it as a kind of psychological entrenchment. What looks like a convenience or perk also acts as a lock-in. Kindle, arriving in the late 2000s, attacked an entire value chain. It shifted reading from a physical supply chain, publishers, distributors, bookstores, to a digital delivery model where Amazon controlled distribution, pricing, and the customer relationship. For publishers, it was both disruption and disintermediation. Amazon removed friction for readers, but also elevated its own pricing power and data advantage. If software and customer obsession were the front of the engine, Amazon Web Services turned out to be the hidden gearbox that powered much of the Internet. AWS began not as a vanity project, but as an internal solution. Amazon needed scalable, reliable infrastructure to handle its own variable workloads. The team that learned how to split out those capabilities realized they could rent them out. In doing so, Amazon moved from being merely the world's largest retailer to becoming the engine room of the web. Startups, enterprises, and governments adopted these cloud services, often because AWS made deployment faster and cheaper. To understand Amazon's structural power, imagine not only that you own the store where buyers shop, but also that you own the pipes the rest of the economy uses to build its digital storefronts. That shift, from retailer to infrastructure provider, multiplied Amazon's influence in ways few anticipated. Yet along with elegant engineering came hard edges. As Amazon grew, patterns emerged that drew criticism and eventually regulatory attention. Third-party sellers began to complain publicly that their data was being used to create competing private label products. Journalists and investigations reported on cases where sellers found their own best-selling items facing similar, lower-priced alternatives on the platform. Amazon consistently framed these as competitive market dynamics and denied systematic, illicit data mining for private labels. Critics argued the structure of the marketplace made such outcomes both likely and difficult to police. For small merchants, the platform's benefits could be double-edged: access to billions of customers on one hand, and sudden exposure to a marketplace where other agents, including Amazon itself, could change the economics overnight. There are emblematic corporate casualties in this transformation. Chains that once anchored Main Street and mall corridors, names like Borders, Toys R Us, Circuit City, and Radio Shack, folded amid the shifting retail environment. Their declines had complex causes: e-commerce growth, changing consumer habits, credit crises, and strategic errors. Still, observers point to a pattern. Amazon's relentless focus on price, selection, and convenience reshaped shopper expectations and, over time, the cost structures of bricks-and-mortar retail. Where a competitor saw product margins, Amazon saw an opportunity to engineer them down by owning distribution, pricing algorithms, and customer relationships in a way that larger incumbents found hard to match. Within Amazon's own walls, the very culture that produced speed and invention also produced tension. The company's operational model prized measurable productivity, quotas, time-stamped performance metrics, and pervasive monitoring of fulfillment workers. Investigative reports and worker testimonials described grueling shifts, strict break policies, and technology that tracked every pick and pause. Amazon pushed back. It emphasized safety investments, argued that its compensation compared favorably within the sector, and highlighted automation's role in reducing repetitive injuries. The truth like most truths at scale, was layered. Many employees praised clear expectations and career mobility Amazon afforded, while others painted a portrait of relentless pace that left little room for rest. Congress and labor advocates would later pick apart those tensions in hearings and public debates, asking whether scale and efficiency had outpaced humane working conditions. At the same time, Amazon's competitive tactics reached beyond logistics into local markets and business relationships. Critics alleged that the company copied marketplace hits, used search and recommendation algorithms to prefer private label alternatives, and relegated smaller merchants to the margins. Amazon's public defense typically emphasized open competition and consumer benefit, lower prices, faster delivery, broader selection. Investigations showed a pattern of heated disputes between sellers and platform operators, and lawmakers from both parties raised concern that the company's dual role as gatekeeper and competitor created conflicts of interest that deserved oversight. These questions were not limited to the United States. Regulators in Europe and elsewhere began exploring whether existing competition law was equipped to handle platforms that both hosted and competed with third-party sellers. Bezos himself became a visible symbol of the contradictions he set in motion. As Amazon's stock surged, Bezos's personal fortune ballooned into the stratosphere. His public persona evolved from studious founder, the guy with the door on sawhorses, to an almost mythic figure, the billionaire who bought a Blue Origin rocket company, a stake in a major newspaper, and who, in private life, experienced a high-profile divorce that transferred a large portion of his wealth. In 2021, he stepped back from the CEO role, handing the reins to Andy Jassy, the manager who had built AWS into a business of its own. The move reframed Bezos, less of an everyday manager, more of an architect with time and capital to pursue long-range projects. Space travel, in particular, recast his ambitions in literal cosmic terms. Blue Origin made plain that Bezos's long view, the same patience that let Amazon reinvest and scale, was now aimed at another frontier. All of this, the product innovations, the logistics, the platform dynamics, the growth doctrine, fed a singular structure, a company that operated as an infrastructure provider, a marketplace, and a retailer simultaneously. That architecture produced amazing conveniences: same-day delivery of essentials, the ability for micro-businesses to reach global customers, cloud services that democratized computing. It also produced dependencies. Small sellers became reliant on Amazon's flow of customers. Publishers had to negotiate with a dominant distributor. Cities and labor groups faced new pressures from a delivery-centric economy. When Congress began to scrutinize these dynamics, the debate was not whether Amazon had succeeded. It was how much power a single private company should hold in shaping markets that touch so many aspects of daily life. The most revealing parts of this story are the structural mechanics, the decisions designed not to be noticed until they were everywhere. Take Prime. Initially a shipping perk, it became a loyalty engine by bundling services and conditioning customers to prefer speed. The psychology was simple. Once you pay for convenience, you begin to default toward it. Or consider AWS. By solving Amazon's internal scaling problems and then packaging that capability for others, the company redistributed technological capability across the global economy, but in a way that made many firms dependent on Amazon's platforms and pricing, or the marketplace. It expanded selection without inventory risk, but also centralized insight into commercial trends, letting Amazon deploy capital where competitors could not. None of these mechanisms were accidental. Bezos and his teams planned and iterated. They ran experiments and scaled winners ruthlessly. The 6-page memo culture used to think through proposals replaced flashy presentations with disciplined argumentation. Data became both the fuel and the measuring stick. Where an idea worked, it was amplified and automated. Where it didn't, it was replaced. That logic, test, scale, automate, turned Amazon into a machine. It was a machine that delighted consumers, but also compressed margin structures and concentrated power. With scale, scrutiny followed. Congressional hearings put executives under oath and in public view, probing the reach of the company and the adequacy of current antitrust frameworks to address platform dominance. Regulators and lawmakers asked whether existing tools could handle firms that were simultaneously marketplaces, sellers, and critical infrastructure. The legal and political conversation about tech power shifted from abstract warnings to concrete investigations. Amazon defended its practices by pointing to low prices and customer choice. Critics insisted that lower prices today could hide higher costs to competition, labor standards, and long-term innovation. There's a paradox in the personal and institutional arc. Bezos' ambition to get big fast and his willingness to accept early losses were instrumental in creating efficiencies that benefited consumers and reshaped industries. But those same choices created dependencies that concentrated leverage into one organization. His personal pivot toward space is not incidental. If Amazon was about creating a platform for earthly commerce, Blue Origin signals a founder aiming for planetary and infrastructural horizons, how we live, move, and work in space. That's consistent with the biography, a childhood fixation on rockets, and a lifelong tendency to imagine scale, and it reframes Amazon as a stepping stone, a launchpad for broader ambitions. So what is the untold story? It's not that Bezos was simply ingenious or simply ruthless. It's that he designed rules and systems that changed incentives for billions of transactions, and those systems continue to shape decisions made by consumers, entrepreneurs, and regulators. Amazon is less an accidental monopoly than an engineered empire, infrastructure, habit, and marketplace combined until other options became hard to sustain. The company's innovations produced enormous value, and they redistributed power in ways that are only now being passed in courtrooms, committee hearings, and public debates. We are left with a question that refuses a tidy answer. Did Bezos build the future? Or did he build a machine that now needs governance? The engine is still humming. Prime boxes still arrive on doorsteps. AWS hosts services that run hospitals, newsrooms, and startups. Marketplace still gives small sellers access to customers they could not otherwise reach. But the same systems that deliver convenience also concentrate decision-making in one corporate design. That concentration begs public judgment about competition policy, about labor rules suited to automated productivity expectations, about how much technological backbone should be under private control. Whatever the verdict, one thing is clear. Jeff Bezos' methods, frugality as strategy, obsessive measurement, platform thinking, and willingness to long-game investments changed the shape of capitalism. He turned a bedroom door desk and a highway business plan into a machine whose bits and boxes touch nearly every corner of modern commerce. The engine he built remains powerful, useful, and contested all at once. If you want a deeper look at the engine room, a separate deep dive into AWS and the regulatory questions it raises, watch our next episode on cloud power and antitrust. And if this untold story sparked a new way of seeing the world you shop in every day, share it with someone who still thinks of Amazon as just another store.